Check it out. This is what a failed internal torque sensor looks like on the electronic steering control modules found in the 2008 through 2012 Ford Escapes. Start it up, maybe find it first, then you go to use the steering, let off of it. Yeah, it does something like that. Not good. This is going to be a very expensive repair.
Now the part that actually failed down in the steering column is called a torque sensor. Now what it is basically an over-engineered steering wheel angle sensor that allows the power steering control module to know exact zero center of the steering wheel and where it's at in relation to that as you steer and go down the road. Now there was a recall for this part and the steering column control module codes, but I would say 100% of all the vehicles I saw for the recall had no codes, and the Ford's direction at that point is to reflash the module, and that's it. It closes the recall and any responsibility on Ford's part. So now you're stuck footing the bill. Luckily though, out of that recall came this lower level service part for around $250 instead of spending $1,200 on a whole new column like it used to be. So it's much cheaper, but you're still footing the bill plus install. So what we're going to do today is we're going to show you how to install this and save you on the labor part of it because it can almost double the price when you go to get one of these installed. The reason being is installing one of these is very tricky. There's a 5-degree window of accuracy on here, and that's it. Once you get outside that window, after you install it, the steering wheel will flip out on you, it'll ruin the sensor, and you have to start all over again with a brand new sensor. Okay, so think about it, 250, 250, 250, it adds up real quick. Today we're going to show you how to install this part, install it right, and I'll zero in on the alignment process so you guys know to make sure that yours is okay before pulling that pin and setting it in place. Let's get to it.
All right, here we go. First steps in this procedure is to drive the vehicle into your garage, nice and straight, wheels nice and straight like that. And then we're gonna jack it up evenly on both sides, put some jack stands under the pinch weld, and get it up in the air so the wheel can turn freely. Then you're gonna open the hood and disconnect your negative battery cable, okay? And if you have a hybrid like this one is, you wanna first, of course, pop your rear lift gate, because back here they want us to also disconnect the high voltage battery, disarm it, okay? Way you do that is you take it from the lock position, which is on, to unlock, and then I like to go over to service for shipping on there. So we'll go like that, up, and then we'll put it right back in there and keep dirt and stuff out, and it'll be in service. That's way the high voltage and the low voltage is all disconnected. Then we can come inside the vehicle here and get started. All right, here we go. Now our tires are nice and straight. Our wheel here is nice and straight. What we're gonna do now with everything disconnected is turn the key just a little bit so we can turn the wheel to around the 11 o'clock position, like right there. So think about it, clock is like 12 right here, around 11 o'clock, right about there. And that's gonna help us align it when we're taking it off, and of course going back together with the torque sensor. Now once it's set, we can go ahead. Underneath here, you'll see three round holes on this steering column shroud, okay? And that bolts it to the steering column. They're 5.5 millimeter, so we're gonna go ahead and take those out. Get it lined up on there. And make sure you put these out to the side because they're special bolts. They're real hard to find otherwise. And my bottom one is missing. Then down here underneath the steering column, there's another piece of trim right here for the knee bolster. You're simply gonna grab onto it. Be careful on both sides. Pull it off nice and even and get it out of here. Underneath that, you'll see a metal panel going across here with 4 10mm bolts. We're gonna take that off so we have some access. And then there's also your hood release right here. We need to take that off. Another 10mm bolt, and we'll get it out of here. gonna wiggle it off of here and get it free. Just kind of locks into here. There we go. And it slides right off. Then we'll get those 4 bolts for the knee bolster. You'll see them, 4 black bolts. And what I do to keep track of all these bolts is I will put them off to the side with the component that I'm removing. Alright, now at this point, we can release the column, drop it down a little bit, relock it, and then we're going to start to separate the upper and lower part of the column here, the shroud. And this top piece, it kind of just pulls off. Just be careful. I like to use my cat claw and separate them. There we go. And the rest of it I'll just pull off by hand. Just like that. Off to the side. Then this lower portion with the key out. Okay. Release it once again. We'll bring it down, 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 downtown. Move it around a little bit. And then pull it off. Make sure it's still at the 11 o'clock position. Mine moved. Very, very critical. It's going to help us align. Okay. And now bring it in close because we're going to disconnect a lot of stuff on the column here. Alright, now once that shroud cover is off and your knee bolster's off down here, all your trim pieces, you see we now have access to all the different connections on here, like the clock spring, the turn signals, the ignition switch. Just follow this main harness up to where it branches off to all these different connectors. Okay, you'll see them. They go up and around over the PATS receiver, all that stuff, and disconnect them. That way we can separate the harness from the column and then pull this whole column off as a unit. Now once it's disconnected, it looks a little something like this. You can see it just all branches off from that main harness to all these different connections on the steering column. So just disconnect them all. Make sure you get this wire harness retainer right here and right here that attach to the upper part of the column we're taking off. So it's nice and free, and just let it dangle down here. Now the next thing I'm going to remove is the upper steering column bolts right there. It's a T45, one on each side. You can see it right there. And that'll allow us to remove the steering wheel, the upper part of the column, and all that together as one. Then after that, I'm going to come down here over to, you follow this yellow wire down and over. We're going to release that tab right there, and we are going to disconnect it. And we're also going to disconnect it up here where it attaches to the power steering control module. And the way you do this, try to do it left-handed, one-handed, is you simply bring down on this blue plastic clip, and then you press in the side of that gray tab right there, and it'll pull right out. All right, now before we pull those steering column bolts out and pull this thing out as a unit, you want to make sure the steering wheel just doesn't spin around and around because you're going to ruin the clock spring. So what I do is I'll wrap around, a bungee, and we'll attach it over here somewhere on the column. There's a little hole right here. Pull it tight. Wrap it around a couple times, and then I'll hook this other side around the turn signal stalk, and that way it can't just spin on its own, freewheeling. Okay. All right, now we're going to pull those bolts out, those T45 bolts I just showed you. So what I'll do is this side first. It's a little harder to see, and then we got to support it. And we'll get this side next. Let's lock this, make it easier. Of course, again, very critical. Let's keep it around 11 o'clock. Okay, right about there. And then we'll pull this other bolt out. Support it. All right. Now we can just support all the way through. Pull it, pull it, pull it, and it comes right out as a unit. Now at this point, we're just looking at it and we're working on it. It's all right here out in the open, okay? Now don't worry about your steering wheel losing its alignment with its other shaft on here, because one of these splines on here is much wider than the rest. So only splines onto here one way. At this point, we're going to bring you down here so you can see exactly how to do this. All right, here we are looking down into the receiver tube there for the power steering control module. And this again is our torque sensor wiring harness we're going to be taking off here soon. But first, we need to clean around the area to make sure that it doesn't have any debris or dirt or fuzzies. You'll be surprised what actually gets attached to these things. You don't want any of that getting inside the power steering control module. So what I'll do is just kind of cover the front here and blow off the rest. Okay, and I'll also wipe it down just so it's as clean as possible. All right, now you see this huge snap ring that goes around the outside? We need to take that off so we can get this tube out of the way and get access to that sensor. So it's a big snap ring, but it's pretty easy to get off. It's not super duty or anything. And one side may bind. There we go. Woo! At that point, we can take the snap ring off. The one thing to note on here is this bevel. See this bevel? That needs to face towards us when it goes back in. See how this side doesn't have it? It's flat. And this side's beveled. It needs to face towards us. It's about as big as a horseshoe almost. Jeez. Okay, now I can pull this tube off. Oh, there it is. All right, now we're going to disconnect the torque sensor wiring harness down over and underneath, like I showed earlier. So the first thing we'll do is disconnect right here where it has a little retainer for the harness. We'll get it free. This is why it's good sometimes to have multiple cat claws. And it comes right out. And then underneath here, all right, next we'll get this seal out of here. You see it right here? It just kind of seals where the wire harness goes into the column here. So we'll take that off, put it to the side. Looks a little something like that. Goes in like that. Keep that to the side. All right, now next, before you start trying to pull this thing off here, we need to align it perfectly. Putting this at the 11 o'clock position got it close, so we just need to bump the wheels, the tires, a little bit left or right to actually make this perfectly align. Okay, I got you in here nice and close because this step, this alignment step, is critical, okay? What you want to do is align this notch in the steering shaft with this triangle right here, which I colored black, on the torque sensor, okay? So you just need to go out there and bump the wheels left or right to align yours so that it aligns perfectly, and then we're safe to start removing this torque sensor. And this right here is why the vehicle is off the ground. So we can simply come over here and move it a little bit. And we can come back and check, or preferably have a helper. And we can check our alignment on there and get it perfect. All right, now that the notch and triangle are perfectly aligned, it's safe to remove this torque sensor. Now the way you're going to do this is you're going to use a nice pick set like this. We're going to grab that harness we disconnected earlier for the sensor, and then we're going to hook it on the back side here, and we're going to pull it off. get it dislodged. There we go. And then we can pull the sucker off. There it is. It's off. It's out of there. Time to install the new one. All right, now we're going to take the alignment tool that comes in the kit and we're going to install it over. Now, this should spline right on to the column, and that notch we lined up earlier, and then sit in this pocket right here like that, nice and free. No binding. This one right here is flush. This is flush. This is perfect. It's not binding, and it's also locked in the keyway. So we did a perfect alignment. Good to go. We can get rid of this sucker now. All right, here it is. Are you guys scared yet? Well, this can be an expensive mess up, so pay attention. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna install the new torque sensor on here, and we are going to align it perfectly, seat it, and we're gonna leave this locking pin in place for now. So go ahead and pay special attention to it. Get in here. We're gonna bring it down. Right about there. We're gonna line up that notch. Same thing. We're lined up down here too. And then we're just gonna touch it on both sides here so we can seat it. It's fully seated in there. And you'll feel it'll be a definite stop. Okay. So we're setting here. We're lined up the notch. Everything looks beautiful. And we are definitely fully seated. All right, let's go ahead and install our positioning tool once again, and we'll just verify everything is lined up still before you pull this locking pin. And just push on it. Also, and it'll help seat the torque sensor. Same thing, we're good to go right here, and we're locked in. Okay. Okay, we get to pull this guy off now. All right, here's the critical step right here. You want to verify the hole where your locking pin is on your new one is pretty much centered in this little window right here. See how it moves? And that's the amount of error we can have when aligning this. So as long as it's somewhere in the window, we can go ahead and pull that locking pin out. Now mine is set. It looks like it's a little bit to the right, but basically aligned. So we'll pull the pin out of here. Woo! All right, actually it looks really good. Let me look at mine real quick. Actually, mine is right there in the center, which is the most critical step, because if this is not done right, you're supposed to pull a sensor out, buy a new one, and start all over. Okay? So let's see if we can get you down in here and show you mine. You can see my window there. It looks like it's far off to the right, but actually it's right there in the center. I just can't get you in here. Let's see. All right, there it is. You can see it's right there in the center of that window. It's locked in. We are good to go. We are aligned. So at this point, we can start reassembly. All right, let's go ahead and install our seal. Get that put back in there, our little dust seal. Everything looks good. Try not to disturb the sensor. We'll get that put back on. Yeah, just something like that. All right. Let's Put our tube back on here. Get it back in place that way. And we'll get our big old snap ring back on there. Remember, the bevel faces us. And that'll lock it all in place for us. All right, now with that snap ring back on, our steering column just pushes right on. Remember, only splines one way. Push it in, put your 2 bolts in to bring it back up. It's basically the reverse of removal. Get it back together, get your wire harness attached to all your different switches on here. Reconnect your battery, both under the hood and in the rear on hybrids. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your key and you're gonna put it in to the ignition while it's all apart like this still. And we're gonna figure out real quick here if it was aligned properly or not, okay? We're gonna turn the key to the on position. Don't touch the wheel, because if it's not aligned properly, this thing's gonna flip out on us, spin one way, and then just sit there and twitch and go nuts. Let's hope it doesn't happen, because at that point you need a new torque sensor. Here we go. Remember, keep your hands clear of the wheel. Start it up, try it out. Seems to work very well. All the way to the locks. And it may feel weird at first until you go lock to lock. It's figuring out where the end stops are at, okay? Now once it knows where the end stops are at, it'll be much smoother. There it is. Works like a charm once again. Now the one issue after installation you may notice is that you can turn one way and it seems a little stiff, but you turn back the other way and it seems nice, smooth, power assisted steering. Back the other way, it's a little stiff. Back the other way, nice and smooth. Now what's happening here is the steering column control module has not learned the trims end to end yet. So it may want to go end to end and it'll start to learn that procedure right there. Okay, and you just drive it for a while and it may come back and it'll even out both sides. Okay, now there is a fast learn mode. Get this thing nice and straight again. There is a fast learn mode on the scan tool that you may want to have done either at your Ford dealership or your local independent garage, and it's called steering wheel torque trim sensor alignment basically. So go ahead, yep, you want to do this. I think you gotta have the key off for this. Key is on, engine off, and it's gonna kind of learn that straight ahead value. Da-da-da. It's that quick. You turn the key off, and that's the quick learn procedure for this. Now once this is done, you should be able to start the engine and use it. Feels good. Feels good. At that point, it's trimmed. Looks good. Yes, both directions. Good to go. And it'll set it. That's all there is to that. All right, so how was it for you guys? It gets kind of hairy there for a while. You want to make sure it's perfectly aligned and in that window before pulling that pin out of there. So make sure you do your pre-checks, make sure you install it right, make sure it's all aligned, it's snapped in good, and then do your post-checks with that alignment tool and look at that window on there directly dead on and make sure it's somewhere in that window before pulling that pin. Otherwise, the procedure is really, really simple. It's just that alignment is critical. Now, like I said, you may want to get that trim done at a dealer or independent shop or your buddy that has a high enough level scan tool to do it, and then you'll be good to go for the rest of the life of the vehicle at that point. All right, that's about it. Hopefully I helped you guys save some money and help you fix your Ford yourself. I'll see you next time, guys.